All right, man. Welcome to the Crow Discovery Project. I want to rerun portions of a clip I did a while back because it points out so aptly the fraud that we are constantly handed, and I feel a bit like a broken record. And to be fair, there are so many more people now coming with open minds to actually challenge this nonsense that the space agencies and our governments have been putting out to us while they steal our money with one hand and give us fraud with the other. I would point out that the truth is not hard to see, but you have to get to a place where you are willing to have an open mind and challenge what you are being presented with. Now, I've said this a lot of times. Whether or not you think there's any value in coding words with numbers, numerology, gematria, Kabbalah, I would point out further that there are plenty of old languages like what the Romans supposedly used, where letters and numbers were the same thing. Hebrew, back in the day, letters and numbers the same thing. So knowing that, you have a prerequisite that you can bounce the possibility off, to know it is actually a thing that has been done. The only reason I'm bringing this up is because when I made this clip last time, people were not so ready to hear truth. It's a big deal that ISIS is encoded in all this comet nonsense. And for those who are unaware, ISIS encodes 9/11, both the big way in numerology or gematria and the small way in numerology. No matter how you break it down, it encodes 9/11. Whenever you see 9/11, whenever you see ISIS, or whenever you see a single word from a space agency, you are looking at fraud. Without saying much more, because it does sound like a broken record. I get so tired of pointing out the same thing over and over. But this is a good clip, and while I might change a little of the voiceover I did back in the day, truth is most of it fits just as well, and the fraud that I pointed out then is the fraud now. And also, we're on a comet out there, guys, according to NASA. Where's all the images and video? Well, of course, we had equipment failure. But don't worry, China's on the moon right now. Where is all the images and video? Did we have equipment failure? What's the excuse this time? The point is it's all a lie, and it's a provable lie. All you have to do is take the time to challenge what you're being presented with. Let's jump in and look at comets. All comets have a coma. The head of a comet is a coma. So I ask you all, are you in a coma? Or can you see? Are you awake? Let's take a look. This is about the recent comets that we've had and the observations that I've made, and basically the truth about what is going on with these comets, and I'll mention ISON. But before I get to 67P and the whole Philae Rosetta landing and all this other stuff, I will mention that what I did before I started doing the research on this is I said to Crowette, what do you suppose the odds are that they could not resist making the comet the same shape as the map of the island that it's named after, where the Isis temple is, and Trajan, and all these other things from Egypt's antiquity. And anyhow, let's jump in. I'll start with what I know firsthand from Comet ISON. Here we go. Okay, so back when ISON was headed in, I was taking images of Mars. As a matter of fact, I think the first video posted here on this channel is about Mars and what we saw. And at the time, we thought ISON had interacted with Mars. We noticed that Mars changed color very quickly over a few days. And that's supposed to happen over like 18 or 36 months, I forget, but it's a long period of time. It does change color, almost like a season, but it happened in a very short while. But as ISON got close and it was approaching, I don't think it ever got to naked eye magnitude, but as it was approaching naked eye magnitude, I woke up every morning at 3 a.m. for a week to get images of ISON. I had perfect coordinates, I had everything I needed, good seeing, and I couldn't find it. It was not there. But you could say, well, you didn't have the right coordinates, or you could say a lot of things. But here's the problem. I think the star was Regulus. Don't call me on it. I'm pretty sure if I remember back, the star was Regulus and Mars were right there. So I was looking in Stellarium, I was looking at websites, I was looking at what NASA was saying, and we had these markers out there, the star Regulus, which is very bright, and the planet Mars. And I finally got fed up as we were approaching naked eye visibility, which we never did. Not to mention that they said it was going to be the comet of the century, which never happened. But I took a camera with a wide field view, centered it up in the part of the sky it was supposed to be in, and I opened the shutter for 5 minutes. There was nothing there. ISON was not there. I tried my hardest to find ISON, and I couldn't do it. So I'm going to preface the conversation we're going to have about Comet 67P with the first-hand experience of realizing that the Comet ISON was not where we were told it was. Moving on. Okay, so let me start by saying every image in this video is from Wikicommons, and these are copyright-free images. But let's talk a little bit about comets. As you can see in this image, comets have historically marked significant events. Here's the birth of Jesus, and as you can see, there's a comet in the background. We should always look at the etymology of words. If you look at the word comet and you look it up, it means hair. And from this image you can kind of see if that's in fact true, that ancient people named it that for a reason, that yeah, a lot of comets, the tail does look like hair. In the modern age, this makes us think of DNA, or at least makes me think of DNA. But the head, the top portion of a comet is called a coma. If you look up that word, it does also mean hair in the ancient languages, but it also means to be asleep, and that should make you think. And the reason is because what we've learned with these past comets, and the one that I'm going to cover here, 67P. These comets, well, here's an example. I can identify almost every major comet as I've been into astronomy since the 90s. They have a look, and this look sticks with them. Most of the time, not in every case, but most times you can see an image of a historical comet and you can ID it because it has a look. Almost every image of ISON we got looked different. Not only that, historically comets were white, sometimes bluish, or a combination of the two. Now they're all green. There are just so many things for those who want to critically think and look carefully at what we're being presented with when you think about comets. And I can't stress enough that when you consider that the head of a comet is associated with a coma or sleep or being unaware, that should make you think. Many of these comets and these images that I'm showing you now are associated with major events in history, like earthquakes, plagues, things like this. When you consider what this means, it's either God is sending a comet to say something bad's going to happen to us, or there's some magic going on where a comet shows up when bad things happen, or, I mean, you can fill in the blanks. What does this mean? Historically, comets have been harbingers of dread, and you can look up many cases where comets show up and people expect something bad to happen. But now that we've covered just basically a little bit about comets, the meaning of the word, and historical comets, let's take a look at what's going on now with the Rosetta Philae 67P comet. Okay, so I am going to start covering this current comet that they have supposedly landed on with a dead giveaway. This comet was discovered on September 11th, 1969. Now, for those of you who are awake, or at least mildly awake, you should understand that any time you see this date, there's shenanigans going on. That's all there is to it, and it gets better, so let me move on here. The Rosetta spacecraft mission launched in 2004. They knew the comet was there because they had supposedly spotted it on the 11th of September in 1969, but they had no idea what the shape was. So they launched it in 2004, already having named it Philae and Rosetta, which are two things that come out of Egypt. The island, which the Philae portion of this thing, the lander is named after, is an island in Egypt that was, it held a temple of Isis and some Roman things linking Rome to ancient Egypt, Cleopatra, and the main thing being the Isis temple is there. Anytime you hear Isis, you should know there's shenanigans going on, like this whole terrorist crap that gets jammed down our throat every day. But what I'm getting at here is they name these things not knowing anything about the shape of the comet. The shape of the comet is first seen on July 14 of 2014. So that's when they realized the shape of the comet. And the Rosetta spacecraft enters orbit on the 10th of September 2014. And I didn't look very hard, but I would not be surprised to learn that actually if you look in time zones or the way they did the date, that it was actually the 11th of September 2014. So when they do get into the landing thing, they hold this public renaming of the landing site that's going to go on. So 150 countries give input, and they land on Agilkia. So if you know anything about Philae, the island where these temples were, it got flooded twice, once by a lower dam, once by an upper dam, and they ended up taking all the temples and rebuilding them on a new island called Agilkia, which is what they end up naming the new landing zone, which was previously J with a backup site of C. And of course there's numerology behind all that stuff. But let's get a little further into this. This is one thing that just kind of floored me when I read it. The Osiris camera that is on this thing, one of the cameras, Osiris 1, cost $100 million. That's a $100 million camera. In other words, 10 of these things would cost $1 billion. But that's not even the stunning part. The stunning part is this camera is 4 megapixels. Now, we always hear endless complaints from people about the imagery that we get from our space agencies, and here is just another example where they spent $100 million on a camera and it has 4 megapixels. What that means is each megapixel is 1,000,000 pixels of resolution. That's what it means. But what they do is they state that 10 years ago, 4 megapixels was a great camera. Well, I searched for about 2 minutes to discover that in 1999, Kodak already had professional digital cameras of 6 megapixels. So you're telling me that a space agency that's going to spend $100 million, the best they can do is 4 megapixels when Kodak had already made a 6 megapixel camera in 1999, which isn't even really the argument. With $100 million, they could have made 1,000,000 megapixels had they wanted to. So let's keep moving. This whole thing is kind of right out of the movie Armageddon from 1998. The comet that they're going to try to land on, or that they do land on in the end, is 84,000 miles per hour. That's how fast it's going. So when you consider the odds of putting anything on something traveling 84,000 miles per hour on an object that is 310 million miles away from Earth, you start to put, if you critically think about this, what it means. It means they can't communicate, for one. I think it's something like 24 or 25 minutes for communication to get that far. So they're landing on something going 84,000 miles an hour, and they can't even give it a command without 24, 25 minutes going by. And when you keep reasoning this out, there's no video footage of the landing. They've produced nothing yet. We got one image of the lander going down, and when it landed, apparently the site that they chose didn't have enough sunlight and the thing shut down, which this is typical again. We get this all the time when they don't want to have to cover their butts. There's failure, mechanical failure. So what they're saying now is they hope they get close enough to the sun to get this thing working again. It goes on and on. We were shown pictures of this thing from further out in space where it's glowing like the sun with a tail and a glow around it. When they get there, there's none of this. There's no vapor trail. So now I'm just going to finish out with what I called in advance before I looked at any of this when I was talking with Croet. Here is the image of one of the angles of the 67P comet perfectly matching the island that is named after that holds the Isis temple. I mean, if you can look at this and still in your mind consider there's nothing funny going on here, I don't really think there's any communication level we can reach that will help you get over the hump. Um, and I think I've showed you all I need to show you. If you go take a closer look at this, and I would not be surprised to learn that if you lined up this image that I'm showing you now with a map, that one of the landing sites was on the Isis temple or something like that, because this is the kind of games they play. So that's it. I've showed you enough that you should be able to understand this is nonsense. The name of this lander should not be fillet, it should be fallacious, because that's what this is. It is fallacious. You are being fed garbage and you are swallowing garbage if you believe this. And that also means that every time you repeat what you have been told or make decisions based on this bad information, it is all done based on error. And that's all there is to it. So when people come to my channel and they ask me why I have no faith in the space agencies and why I do not accept any information, what I have shown you here should underscore it. And in closing, you know, comets have comas. And if you can't think about what is going on here, then in a sense you're living in a coma. You're kind of asleep. What's going on here is a lie on a magnitude that's almost unimaginable. Anyhow, there it is. Cheers.